the Rotary Club. Just so everybody knows, the meeting is being recorded. And welcome to my last meeting as your president. It's been an incredibly unusual year, and I appreciate everybody sticking with us and learning how to meet by Zoom and being flexible to new activities and socials. And we've really had a great year, and it's due to the resilience of our club members. So thank you so much. Today, I had a hard time getting a hold of somebody to do the invocation. So I'm going to go ahead and read it so you're stuck with me for this part of the meeting too. I've been trying to work on just slowing down and being appreciative, and I came across this prayer and I thought it was kind of neat, so I wanted to share it with you today. It's called The Power of a Whisper. So bow your heads, please, and join me. The power of a whisper. Slow me down today, Lord, and whisper a word or two or more in the quiet of my mind and heart. When I'm cursing myself or others, whisper words of blessing. When I'm judging another's words and deeds, whisper words of patience. When my voice is still and silent, whisper words that I might speak. When I'm saying too much, whisper words to shut me up. When I've failed, whisper words of pardon. When I'm facing grief and loss, whisper words of hope and consolation. When I'm stuck in my own foolishness, whisper words of wisdom. When I'm confounded and confused, whisper words of counsel. When I'm at war with my neighbor or myself, whisper words of peace. Slow me down, Lord, and help me find a quiet place to hear the whisper of your word. Amen. And I have asked Stu if he would please lead us in the pledge today.
Please stand and join me in the pledge. It's the flag, right hand salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Stu, and thank you, Patty, for putting the image on the screen for everybody. As far as pop-ups today, I just wanted to remind everybody that you can RSVP for meetings and events on DAC-DB. There's a calendar there where you can check our schedule. Just please make note that there will be no lunch meeting next week. That's the night of the President's Party, and that is 6 p.m. next Wednesday at Timuquana. If you will please be sure to RSVP on DAC-DB so we can have enough food and drink for all. I also wanted to thank William and Lee for organizing a really fun event at Manifest Distillery. We had a good crowd, and we had a nice tour, and the food was provided by Noni's Catering, and it was awesome. It was a good event. Hopefully we'll be able to start getting out and do more things like that. I had a real nice thank you note from the principal of West Riverside Elementary, just thanking us for the meals that we provided for their teachers. And she made a special point of saying that she appreciated us delivering the lunch and by following all their safety protocols. So thanks again to those who volunteered with that lunch and the lunches that we provided at Lee High School. I have some good news next on the list. The grant that we received to update the baseball grounds, that has been completed now. They'll be able to start their season in the fall. So hopefully we'll be able to plan another lunch event out there in the fall that coincides with the beginning of their fall baseball season. But the grounds, the baseball revitalization project has been completed. And I had even better news. The district had some funding that became available kind of at the last minute about 3 weeks ago. And I was able to submit a district grant, which we were awarded. So we'll be able to go into Ike's year with it's a water safety grant for water safety equipment out at Camp Echocotee at the Boy Scout camp. It's about a $9,500 total grant, and we will be awarding them lifeguard stands. For those of you who were at the family day out at the camp, you probably saw their pool area. They had old broken down wooden lifeguard stands that were probably 40 years old. So we'll be replacing those with new lifeguard stands with umbrellas for the guards, and 2 AEDs for use at the pool and on the property, along with first aid kits and bleed control kit. So that was an exciting award, and it'll allow us to continue the work that we've done in the past with water safety. Do we have Palmer on the call for Family of Rotary? I don't see him. Did anybody else have good news for the good of the club to share? If no, I will ask Ike if he'll please introduce our speaker today, Frank Camp from Jacksport. Well, there goes my dog. Frank, I guess you'll have to introduce yourself. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Ike is shunning me. No, that's perfectly fine. No, thank you very much for having me and for inviting me to speak this afternoon. I really do appreciate it. My name is Frank Camp. I'm a director of cargo sales here at the Jacksonville Port Authority, Jacksport. I work in the sales and marketing department here. My primary function is working with importers and exporters to help build more efficient supply chains by utilizing the marine terminals here in Jacksonville. I'm part of the container development team here. We have about a 6-person sales team, but 3 of us work exclusively in containers, working with all the shippers and other ancillary cargo supporting businesses, as well as the ocean carriers to build containerized freight here. In the past, I've worked with the automobile shippers, as well as non-containerized cargo, break bulk, steels, and things like that, as well as project cargoes. So a little bit of everything. Today, I was asked to speak on the incident this past March that took place in the Suez Canal when the Ever Given became stuck sideways in the southern section of the Suez Canal, how that impacted operations there in the Suez. But I'm also going to pull it out a little bit and give you some sense of what's been going on in the global supply chain over the past 12 months. And at a macro level, how the Suez fits into what's been a very challenging environment, and how it's been kind of part and parcel to what's been going on in a very stressed time in global shipping and supply chain. So I have some slides that I'm going to bring up. And let's see. Can everyone see that? Yep. Okay, good. So I thought this picture really summed up global shipping over the past year, in that just about anything that could go wrong has gone wrong. Um, just shy of an octopus coming up and pulling a ship down into the sea. So it's been a very unique time indeed. And we've faced some unprecedented challenges, just like the rest of the world. So we went from a period in March 2020, where volume coming from Asia post Lunar New Year was coming to the US, and the entire world was shutting down. So there was cargo on ships coming to areas of consumption. There was no consumption going on. And then just as quickly as retail started to open up and our spending pattern shifted from services to products, there was this unrelenting demand for stuff. Um, Most of it coming through e-commerce challenges. So there's been a surge of demand that really hasn't relented. We have surges and peaks throughout a normal shipping year related to holidays and back to school and Chinese New Year, but there's never been a period where we've had such demand for freight coming into the US, coming into Europe, and now spreading to other areas of the world, without any kind of abatement. And what that's done is it's displaced equipment. Containers are in areas where they shouldn't be. Chassis that containers ride on are in areas where they shouldn't be. Warehouses are having problems finding staff to work. The ports on the West Coast in Asia, some parts of the East Coast, there's so many ships arriving that there's not enough berth space. So there's really been a lot of um, issues related to the surge of demand that have put a tremendous amount of stress on the shipping network and supply chains. And you throw in an incident like the Suez Canal, which blocks the canal for 6 days. And while that gets a lot of the headlines, it's it's obviously not it's a unique situation, and something that needs to be rectified. In the grand scheme of things for what's been going on the past 12 months, people in shipping go, oh, something else went wrong. Oh, okay, we'll fix this and we'll move on. But this is a picture here on the slide, from today. I screenshot this about an hour and a half ago. This is current traffic in the Suez Canal. So you've got about 50 ships plus minus a day that transit north and south through the canal. And the Suez Canal is one of the main, one of two main east-west arteries for traffic coming from Asia into North America, or Asia coming into Europe. So the fact that it was shut down for 6 days obviously creates a huge bottleneck and a huge issue for not just containerized cargo, consumption cargo, but also tankers and ro-ro vessels and any number of vessels that need to use that artery. All of a sudden they're faced with a decision: what do I do? This is a picture of the Suez Canal on, I believe it's March 24th or 25th. So this pulls it out a little bit. You can see it in context, how many vessels are moving through the canal on any given day, how many vessels are moving through the Middle East and the Mediterranean on any given day, and who rely on that canal to get from the Mediterranean or Europe into the Red Sea, into the Indian Ocean, and vice versa. It's a tremendous amount, tremendous amount. So pulling back. So the Ever Given is a vessel that was operated by Evergreen Shipping Company out of Taiwan. The vessel itself is owned by a Japanese company. Evergreen was chartering that vessel and operating it for one of their services out of Europe that services ports in, coming out of Southeast Asia, servicing ports in North Europe. So as I mentioned earlier, there's been a tremendous amount of stress throughout the supply chain over the past 12 months. And a lot of that due to COVID and shifting of spending habits from service-related spend to product-related, retail-related spend. So That surge was first felt in the Trans-Pacific, so Asia to North America, as well as Asia to Europe. It's now expanded global. And as I mentioned, once the Suez was shut down for 6 days, really brought to a halt one of the main east-west arteries servicing the major consumption area of Europe. At that time, you had a few vessels that were in queue, a few hundred vessels in queue on the northbound and the southbound transits. And once that ship went sideways and blocked it off, any of the vessels who were in the canal, in the Bitter Lake, waiting to transit, or in the anchorages on the northbound or southbound approaches were stuck. And they could not proceed to their next destination. They're holding freight on board and they're delaying loading of freight in the very next port. So you got a time when people are buying a lot of stuff. There's a lot of containers stranded on ships, both the Ever Given and the vessels waiting to get through. They're waiting on that product to come off the ship so it can get into the retail outlets. And then also there's cargo waiting at the next port for these ships that are stuck in the Suez, waiting to load, that cannot move on. So you have this ripple effect. Normally these vessels proceed through in an orderly fashion. There are some areas of the Suez that are two-way. Unfortunately, this was not one of them. So everyone was stuck. And as these vessels normally proceed through and move on to their next port of call, they stay on schedule. Every port and every vessel has a berthing window. So, I mean, you can tell, a ship can tell even when they're thousands of miles away, when they're going to be calling into Singapore or calling into Rotterdam based on and their transit window through the canal. They can tell you when they're going to arrive. When they get stuck, they cannot. When that vessel was finally dislodged on the 29th, then all of the vessels that were waiting northbound and southbound all proceeded in one caravan to go to the next ports, whether it be in the Middle East, in Asia, in North Europe. So what you have is you had a concentrated bottleneck at the Suez, and then as they all proceed and can move on, now the bottlenecks move to their next ports of call. So you may have three or four vessels call into Port of Antwerp 4 or 5 days after they're due through the Suez Canal. Well, now you've got 6 days worth of vessels that are all waiting to get in at once. And that's happening at all of the major load ports at that time in late March in North Europe, Middle East, and Asia. Here's an example, and it delays cargo. So here's one example that I pulled. There was a vessel that was operated by Hyundai Merchant Marine, named the Hyundai Merchant Marine Stockholm. And that vessel was rerouted around Africa rather than wait. So they already had a built-in delay of about 10 days. Because of delays in all the ports in North Europe, once that vessel arrived to North Europe, instead of it taking 9 days to move through North Europe, it took 19 days to wait out all of the additional delays at the other ports. On her way back to Asia to load, she was supposed to go into Jebel Ali in the United Arab Emirates. The carrier said, we're going to omit Jebel Ali and try and get this vessel somewhat back on track. Any cargo that was going to Jebel Ali, we will discharge in Singapore and we'll feed it into the Emirates. On goes to Stockholm. Well, by the time the vessel finally arrived, now remember, this vessel was 10 days delayed getting around Africa, took 10 days extra to get through Europe, all the other delays. She was originally supposed to discharge, let me see here, originally supposed to discharge cargo on May 4th in Jebel Ali. That cargo is now expected to discharge in Jebel Ali in mid-July. So 2 months later. So that's one ship. So all these other ships are also having very similar challenges. Again, in a time when freight cargo levels are extremely elevated. So the primary impacts really have been to Europe and to Asian ports, but we have had some impact in the US because vessels that come out of Southeast Asia do go through the Suez Canal to get to the East Coast of the US and Canada. It's a shorter transit than going from Southeast Asia, Singapore, Vietnam through the Panama Canal to the East Coast. In Jacksonville, we do have a vessel that comes through the Suez on a weekly basis. A service is called the EC5 with 4 different carriers bringing cargo out of Vietnam and Singapore and Malaysia and Thailand into Jacksonville. One of those vessels, 1 week's vessels, was actually sitting just in the South Anchorage, ready to start proceeding north behind the Ever Given. She was held up for 6 days. We had a vessel that was trying to return on that same service back to Asia. She was in the northbound Anchorage. She was delayed for 6 days. And there, as the delay went on, we had another vessel that the next vessel in the rotation, the next week's vessel, was coming up quickly behind the weekly vessel. The carriers elected to reroute that vessel around Africa. So again, adding time, adding expense, but in a situation that we have today, time is more important than saving on the bunker cost and the toll cost. They just needed to get that vessel into the U.S. to get the cargo off. That service carries a lot of leather goods and furniture for retailers around Florida and the Southeast. But these ships, if you rewind at the beginning of the pandemic, these ships on average, when they're chartered out, go for about $30,000 to $35,000 per day. So to have a vessel sit for 6 days adds almost $200,000 to your bottom line, and the ship hasn't moved. But now, because so much volume is moving, the freight rate has gone to 6-figure territory per day. So you can see these vessel operators had a decision to make. Do we let the vessel wait? When's the vessel going to be dislodged so we can move through? We're incurring possibly $100,000 plus per day of just letting a ship wait. Or do we reroute it around Africa, and we know we're going to pay more in bunker? We know we're going to add 10 days to the voyage, but at least the ship is moving. So it was a really challenging time. By some accounts, that 6 days of that vessel being lodged there delayed up to 6% of the global containerized fleet. Anywhere from, and we use a metric called TEU, which stands for 20-foot equivalent unit. When containerization first began, a box was 20 feet. Today, most of the boxes that you'll see on trucks on the road are 40 feet, so that's 2 TEU. But we had about 1.5 to 1.9 million TEU that were in limbo on the north and southbound approaches, waiting for this one ship to become lodged. And that doesn't account for all of the oil tankers and product tankers, chemical tankers, ro-ro vessels, multi-purpose vessels, you name it, that were also in the mix waiting to get through. So again, a very pointed 6-day impact to global supply chains. It's still having ripple effects. But I want to pull it out now and talk about the overall supply chain and what's going on in the US and other Suez type events that have taken place that just haven't gotten as much television play. So what you have on your screen right here is a screenshot, again, that I took this morning of, on the left, the ports of LA and Long Beach, and on the right, the port of Oakland. So LA Long Beach, that complex is the largest import complex into the US. So every year, about 14 to 15 million containers come through Southern California, most of it from Asia, and most of it imports. It goes into the transport network, and it can serve the local area, but also out into the Midwest via rail. It's the shortest transit from Asia. Obviously, it's only about just over 2 weeks from ports like Hong Kong and Shanghai and Busan in Korea. So it's very attractive for importers because it's such a quick transit. Under normal situations, cargo can come in, the ships come in, they work, the cargo gets on a truck or rail, and alpha goes to the distribution centers or the warehouses. Right now, so many ships are showing up in LA Long Beach with cargo. They don't have enough berths to work the ship. So it doesn't so much matter if it only takes 2 weeks to get a ship to LA Long Beach, if it's waiting for 10 days out front to come in and work. And then when it works, the cargo comes off, it's still delayed getting off the terminal, getting onto a truck, if you can find one, getting to a warehouse, getting unloaded. So I saw a graph from a freight forwarder named Flexport where they said under normal circumstances, it takes about 35 days to get a container from Shanghai to Chicago via LA Long Beach. Today, it's taking 72 days because of all those delays. Shippers then said, it's congested in LA, we're going to Oakland. Well, the same thing happened in Oakland. Now they've got congestion there. And then they said, we're going to the East Coast. They went to New York. They've gone to the South Atlantic. All the congestion has followed. It's very busy everywhere. Today, so this is a picture. This was taken actually in mid-April, I believe, off the coast of LA Long Beach. So a lot of those vessels that you see in that picture are container ships waiting to come in and work. And as I said, it doesn't so much matter if they move very quickly to get to LA Long Beach. If they're waiting out front, they're not moving. The cargo is just sitting on the ship anyway. As shippers have moved over to the East Coast, now we see delays in places like Savannah. And I've been monitoring it because they're our primary competitor. I've been monitoring it for a couple months. Today, there are 5 ships waiting out in front of Savannah. Yesterday, it was 8. Last week, it was up to 10 or 11. About a month ago, a month and a half, it was, there was 1 week where we had about 20 ships waiting outside of Savannah to come in and work. So that spread of cargo surge is all over the place, which is why we make we always offer up to these carriers, hey, look, we know these vessels are costing you so much money, come to Jacksonville. We feel like we've got a very good mousetrap and good economics and good demographics to support increased containerization and cargo movement through here. So we're in contact with these carriers every day. In fact, we picked up a new service about a month ago from Savannah that came because of congestion in Savannah, and we didn't have it in Jacksonville. So we're starting to chip away at that, and the carriers are really attracted by all the positive investments that are going on here at the port. But as I mentioned, this movement of freight from east to west, when there's a surge in demand for cargo space, there's a corresponding surge in the freight rate. So we're in an environment now where freight rates have never been higher in the history of containerization. Right now, the rate from Asia to the U.S. East Coast is about just shy of $10,000 per container. That's up 244% since last June in 2020. It's a similar percentage increase to the West Coast as well. And that's for contracted cargo. That's for your largest shippers in the country who are used to getting very cheap rates. And the carriers are holding back on, well, I shouldn't use the term holding back, but they are signing contracts for lower volumes with their customers than they have in the past, because there's another side of the freight market, which is called spot rate. And spot rate is usually reserved for smaller shippers who don't sign large volume contracts. Those spot rates are higher. And right now we're looking at in excess of $12,000 on average. And I just heard one shipper today tell me that he paid $18,000 to move a container from Asia to Jacksonville. So it's an environment that we've never really seen before. And this demand for cargo, I really don't see it abating before the end of the year, because we're getting into a period where now it's back to school time, and then it's holidays. So we're going into what is normally the peak season, but we haven't had a time to catch our breath. So volume is going to keep coming to the U.S. We're still working off the stimulus. People use that to buy stuff. The National Retail Federation is expecting retail sales to top to almost come to $4.5 trillion this year. It's up about 13.5% from the previous year. And they're looking at containerized volumes into the major import ports, up over 33% last month and up over 50% in May over May of 2020. So it's amazing numbers, really amazing numbers. But again, as I mentioned, there are other issues going on around the world that are impacting supply chains. So this is a picture of a crane collapse that took place in Taiwan about I guess it's about 4 weeks ago. A vessel came in and I don't know why, something happened in the operation of the vessel, but hit the boom on the crane and knocked the crane down. So obviously that berth is going to be not working for the foreseeable future. So every berth that is unavailable means that ships can't go in there and work, and it puts more pressure on other berths in the port. This is a picture of the ONE Apis. And some of you may have seen this picture. This is a vessel operated coming from Asia to California in December. And they had a catastrophic cargo casualty. The vessel thankfully was safe, but they lost a large percentage of their on-deck cargo. What you see in this picture are the containers that remained attached to the ship. There are estimates of about 1,800 containers that went over the side. So, and this isn't in isolation either. There was other cargo casualties as well, where containers were shifted in the stack or went overboard over the past 12 months. And the vessels had to reroute back to Asia to remediate the situation here. And then that brings us to this port here. This is Yantian in South China. It's in the New Territories, just across the border from Hong Kong. This port here handles about 25% of all of China's exports. And I wish we were in person so I could see everyone's hand and ask you, has anyone ever heard of this port? Because or heard of what's going on in Yantian right now. About a month ago, they had a COVID outbreak, and the Chinese government shut the port down, shut a portion of the port down. They were open to receiving inbound cargo and inbound empty containers for reload, but they were not allowing export containers to be dropped off for loading on vessels. So it's been going on for about a month. Now they're close to 100% operational in the yard, but as I mentioned, 25% of all cargo goes through this terminal for export. Over the past month, all the global carriers have collectively skipped about 300 vessel sailings out of this port. And all that cargo, if it doesn't move, has to rolls to the next week's ship, or the next week's ship, or the next week's ship. So think about it when you are flying and you're in Atlanta or Charlotte and the flight to Jacksonville is canceled, all those people that were on that flight need to get on the next one, but that next flight has people. So it's an ongoing ripple effect situation. This terminal handles about 38,000 containers a day. That's on an average day. They're right now handling about, I think it's around 25,000 containers a day. To put that in context, JAXPort, we just had our best containerized month ever in May. We did 125,000 TEU, 125,000 containers. Best ever. This terminal equals that about every 4 days under normal circumstances. So the fact that it was out of commission or partially out of commission for about a month is going to cause huge challenges throughout the supply chain globally. Freight that couldn't move out of Yantian moved to other ports in the region. It went to Hong Kong, it went to Shenzhen, Shekou, or Nansha, all in Guangzhou and the Pearl River Delta. But all of those ports are maxed out with their normal volume. So there's very little space to accommodate a situation like this to handle additional freight. But we'll get through it. It's just going to take quite a bit of time. Now, with that, I think I will leave some time for Q&A. I have some more I wanted to get to, but I want to give all y'all an opportunity to ask questions as well, because I know there's a bunch of them. So I will stop sharing and open it up to questions.
Hey, Frank, this is Ike.
Hey, Ike.
I apologize. I'm at a different warehouse today. I'm not at my office. I had a hard time getting on. So I want to encourage everybody to read Frank's bio on the website. But most importantly, Jacksport was able to get Frank to come from Philadelphia 7 years ago, and it's been much to our benefit. He mentioned the record containerized freight movement through Jacksport last month, all-time record. That's largely in part to Frank and his efforts. So kudos.
Yeah.
Kudos, we'll let you have
Tell
it.
my colleagues that.
Yeah, I'm writing your job review as we speak. So I want to ask about the claims when the Suez Canal green claims. Are people who've lost perishable product or all of this additional time and fuel and resources that have been built, are they going to be able to file claims against Evergreen?
Really, no, not against the carrier. If they purchased shipping insurance, then they'll be protected. Maritime law is really has historically, and when I say historically, going back hundreds of years, has really been written to protect the vessel operators, and that it goes back to sailing vessels to compensate them for the danger of the voyage. Unless the shippers can really demonstrate that vessel was dangerously incapable of making the voyage once they set sail, it's going to be very difficult. But if you have insurance, it will cover the cargo loss. There's a term and a process called general average, which obviously there's an expense to freeing this vessel off the bank. And the Suez Canal Authority, once it was freed, they estimated that expense at over $900 million. And they want to be compensated for that. And the insurance companies for the vessel operator said, no, sharpen your pencil. And they came back and they said, well, maybe it's $600 million. And I said, well, we're going to talk about that. But in the meantime, we as the vessel operator, we don't have $600 million to deal with this. We're going to enact one of those protections for us as a vessel operator and call it general average, which means that the vessel operator and all the owners of cargo on board that ship will have to contribute to a pool of funds to compensate the Suez Canal Authority on whatever the final arbitrated or court ruled amount is that operation took. And there's going to be some ship. So again, if you have insurance, the insurance will take care of that. We don't know what that number is yet because they haven't figured out a final number. I understand that now the parties have come to an agreement at what that number is, but I don't think it's been made public yet. And that's in the past couple of days. It's going to be somewhere between 150 and $200 million that all of those parties are going to have to kick in before they can get their freight. And to Ike's point, there's going to be some shippers of refrigerated cargo. It's no good anymore. So they're going to walk away from it if they have no insurance. There's going to be some shippers of low value cargo or just don't have the financial wherewithal who are going to abandon the freight and walk away from it. But there are going to be a good portion of shippers on board that have insurance or who do need that freight that are going to participate in that fund.
Right, Stu. Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay. On the general average, a long time ago, I had a container on going to North, I think Rotterdam, and they lost several boxes in the North Atlantic in the winter. And I was insured, but when you showed that vessel that lost 1,800 containers, a lot of people going to take a bath on that too. I'm sure the insurance rates are just they're skyrocketing right now.
Every supplier is going to try and participate on the upside. And that situation with the O&E APIS, as I mentioned, it didn't happen in isolation. There was probably maybe not half a dozen, but pretty close ships that had other cargo losses, cargo casualties, especially in the wintertime coming over. There was one vessel rotation that had one ship 1 week had an issue, and then like a month later, another ship in the same rotation going to the same ports had an issue. So you've got typically the same shipper shipping on the same services. So the same shippers were impacted once and then 4 weeks later. And if they have insurance, they're compensated, but and covered. But if not, and there's a lot of people that don't, then that's a cargo loss, and good luck going after the carrier for it and proving that there was proving that the lashing was done improperly before the vessel left. Who's there to see it? So, but I think the bigger issue is for some of these shippers, you just don't have the freight to sell, and if it's not available to sell, you're not generating revenue.
Hey, Frank, it's Tim.
How much additional capacity do we have at our port? How much of what's being backed up at Savannah could we bring here?
We do have available berthing windows that we're actively marketing to ocean carriers. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of interest. And they're looking, the ocean carriers will go where their customers tell them to go. And their customers are the large retailers. And we feel like we've got a very impactful argument to make for the shifting demographics of the state of Florida, and the ability to service the Southeast out of Jacksonville. So as I mentioned, the carriers are taking a real hard look, and of course, operationally, they can get the vessels in and out, and we have a two-way channel that's significantly shorter than Savannah. So they look at what they can save. They're also waiting for the deeper channel to open up, because when that opens up in 2022, they'll be able to bring larger vessels here and more cargo at one time. So there's a lot to be very positive about in Jacksonville.
Hey, Frank, it's Tim. Can you hear me?
I can.
You mentioned workforce challenges. Could you talk a little bit about how your industry has moved into the digital age and who's preparing people to enter into your workforce?
Certainly. So if every day I feel like I read another story about another software as a service company coming into the logistics space offering visibility software. And the ability to book freight digitally, to see where the container is at any one point in time, to manage freight from a distance. So if you're an administrative person, adjusting to this digital world has been pretty seamless, but it's still an industry that requires men and women to be out on the docks and work the vessel. So you're always going to have a large percentage of folks who physically need to be there working the vessels. You need truck drivers. You need folks in the warehouse. You need people operating the trains. But COVID, it's had an impact. It has reduced one of the things I didn't mention, but as far as labor goes, at the ports, they were impacted by COVID, and they weren't able to bring out as many gangs of folks to work the ship as they could have, and that reduced productivity. Which is why when vaccines first became widely available, a lot of the ports out in the West Coast pushed real hard to have vaccination sites at the terminals to get people vaccinated, to get more people back to work. We ourselves have a vaccination site here at our office on Talleyrand. We brought vaccination sites to the terminal Talleyrand. We brought them to Blunt Island to get people vaccinated, because if folks aren't there to work the ship, you can't safely work it. But getting prepared for the future, like a lot of companies, we're an industry that's built on relationships and that face-to-face interaction. And everyone shifted to this digital world like we're doing today. But it's starting to happen where different stakeholders within the supply chain, whether it be at a carrier, an ocean carrier, or a trucking company, or what have you, are starting to go back out in person. It's happening slowly, but it's happening because there's, when you trust people with a couple thousand containers a year, you want to know the person face to face. And especially now when you're paying $10,000 per container, you really want to know the person face to face. I had one shipper in town tell me, and this was the first time that he had ever signed a direct contract with an ocean carrier. He had always gone through an agent or freight forwarder. And he said, and the carrier wasn't meeting face to face. And he said, well, I'm going to tell you something. If I'm going to sign a contract with you for $3 to $4 million, I need to see your face. So it's happening, but everyone's still being very, very cautious. Any other questions I can answer?
Hey, hey, Frank, back to the Suez Canal. Did they determine what actually caused the vessel to flounder and go sideways?
I've heard a lot of speculation, but I haven't heard. I don't know if the report is actually done yet.
But something you made public.
Yeah. I've heard everything from weather to vessel malfunction. One of the latest thing I heard earlier this week was that, and again, speculation, I forget what publication I read this in, that the pilot said, well, I told him there was weather, and the canal authority said, no, got to get it through. And maybe they didn't have enough tugboats. I don't know. There's a lot of people playing Monday morning quarterback. So we'll see what the report says. I will tell you, just when it happened, I spoke to my father. When my dad was younger, my grandfather built oil pipelines in the Arabian Peninsula, and I was talking to him about it because my dad was also a merchant mariner, and he says, when I was living in the desert, I remember there were these winds that just came out of nowhere, and they were something. And he said that, and then soon after you started hearing about weather. So I don't know. We'll see.
Well, thank you for being with us today, Frank. It's definitely
Absolutely.
that I knew very little about. So we appreciate your time and patience, and thanks for being here today.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It was a pleasure, and it was nice meeting y'all. And my contact information is on the JAXPort site. If anyone ever has any questions or just wants to call up and talk, I'd be happy to talk about supply chain with you. My email address is very simple. It's just frank.camp@jaxport.com. So I'm always available.
Very good. Thank you, Frank.
Okay, great. Well, everyone have a good rest of your day.
I believe Patty has a image to share from Stu on his fishing trip. Ah, nice. Very nice. So you said that was not a keeper?
Correct. Sorry about that. It's a Goliath grouper, which I think will grow to 300 or 400 pounds. We used to call them Jewfish, but they don't let you do that anymore. And I guess they want all the youngsters to have a chance to grow up. That thing hit my line, and I swore it was the biggest snook in all of the Everglades. And I was sadly disappointed when it was this ugly son of a gun here. But anyway, it was fun. I got a lot of exercise, lost probably 2 or 3 pounds getting that thing in.
Very good. I'm sorry you didn't get to keep it after all that work. Just wanted to remind everybody that there is no lunch meeting next week. We'll be having the President's Party in person at Timuquana, and that event begins at 6. So please make sure you RSVP on DACTV so that we can plan for your attendance. And is Jeff Rayner still? Yeah, Jeff is on. If you could lead us in the 4-way test, Jeff.
Okie dokie, thanks, President Mary Pat. Fellow Rotarians, just please join me in the 4-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you, Jeff, and thanks everybody for being with us today. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you live and in person on Wednesday. Thanks, Ike, for arranging for our speaker today. Great job as usual.